Welcome to the Earthworks Podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Hello all and welcome to the Earthworks Podcast. I'm your host Jack Higgins and I'm sitting here with Matt Kerens at Paramount Country Club. Matthew, welcome. Thank you.
How's it going? Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, dude, I'm excited too. I really want to thank you for providing this wonderful space. We got like a really cool room here in the basement of the clubhouse. And...
Absolutely. It used to be the accountant's office.
Oh, wow.
Turned it into a beautiful card room.
Yeah, well, it's a cool place. So, yeah, thanks for coming on the EW podcast. We're going to have a cool greenkeeping chat and kind of get to know each other, let you get to know the listener, let the listener get to know you, that whole thing. Let's learn about Paramount Country Club.
Sounds fantastic.
Which has an interesting name, one you would find familiar, Paramount Country Club, Paramount Pictures. They're actually tied together. Maybe you could tell us about that.
Yeah, so that's a product of the original owner of the property, Adolf Zucker, was one of the founding members of Paramount Pictures. So while we don't have any affiliation with Paramount Pictures itself, we did kind of, when we went through a name change back in 2009, we used to be Delwood Country Club, but because the original estate was Adolf Zucker, he was the one that had Tillinghast build the golf course, we kind of wanted to throw back some recognition towards him, and that's where we came up with the Paramount Country Club.
Yeah, it's really cool. The park coming in on the way in is also named Adolf Zucker Park, I noticed.
Yes, so the original Zucker estate was a 300-acre estate. So that included that park that you saw, and then all of the residential areas just on the other side of the golf course was all the original Adolf Zucker estate.
It's very cool. This was like 19 teens and 20s?
Yeah, so I believe he purchased it in 1918 as kind of a retreat. There's been quite a few famous Charlie Chaplin, guys of that ilk on the property back then. And then the official date for the golf course that we go by is 1920 for the 18-hole AW Tillinghast golf course.
Awesome. A little reading last night, learning about Paramount. I learned it was Zucker's idea to make the Paramount picture logo have those stars around it. You know how it's like a mountain with the stars? And those stars, there was 24 stars to represent the 24 actors that he signed for the studio when he opened the studio, because he was very much an actor-focused movie maker.
No way, I did not actually know that little fact.
Yeah, dude, I thought it was cool too.
That is kind of cool.
So anyway, and of course the mountain, we are in the mountains here. This is a mountain scenery, and we'll let you kind of lay the land, but you know, you said some cool stuff. 1920 golf course, AW Tillinghast. And I think if I was also reading it, it was a private golf course for the estate. It wasn't a country club.
It was Zucker's playground, for lack of a better term.
Yes.
It was his private estate. It didn't turn into a country club till some years later. With its own member-owned country club and all of that. Right.
That is quite a flex. You get Tillinghast, the #1 guy, to design your private playground.
Yeah. Apparently Zucker had some pull, which is not surprising when you look back at who he was.
Yeah, very cool. Well, so how about you describe a little bit about where we are here in New York and set the scene in relation to your golf course. Like, you probably, we're here in the 9 o'clock hour. You probably went out for a morning ride this morning. What's it like out there?
So we are right off of the Palisades Parkway up in Rockland County, New York, which is lesser known than our neighbor, Westchester County, which is right over the Tappan Zee. So we're about 25 minutes from Westchester County, more closer to North Jersey, Bergen County.
Yeah, we're on the west side of the Hudson.
Yes, but it's beautiful. I mean, when you come in, especially this time of year, coming in at 6 with the no sunlight, and then you wait till about 6:45 to start seeing the sun peek over those mountains, and that kind of fog dew rise up over the mountains is just a fantastic sight every morning.
I kind of felt that coming in. It was a very cool. I'm about an hour and a half south of here, and like I had that kind of foggy November morning.
Yeah, you just start to see the light coming up over the mountains and start to see the sun peeking up. It's always a very cool sunrise. A lot of cool pictures from the mornings.
And now a lot of elevation change, kind of valleys out here, up and down a little bit.
A lot of elevation change. So interestingly enough, and we'll get back into this a little bit more when we start talking about the greenkeeping aspect of it, but we have about 130 feet of elevation change from our highest point to our lowest point. That also happens to be where our two separate pump stations are located, our highest point and our lowest point.
Okay.
So there is definitely some elevation change. It's a very cool routing. Most recently, our front nine kind of plays down in the lowland. And as you kind of get up to the 9th hole, you then play the 10th hole, which brings you up this 120-foot, not mountain, but big hill
Sure.
that you're playing up a blind shot into a very difficult green there. And then you're kind of in a completely different setup. It's a little bit more tree lined up there and a little bit tighter fairways.
It's kind of on the side of
the side of the mountain. You play up around the mountain, and then you play on our 16th hole, this beautiful tee shot that's coming down off of the mountain into a very nice par 4, beautiful green. And then it kind of takes you back into 17 and 18, back down into the lowland to kind of where you started your journey. So it's a very, very nice routing.
Yeah. Do you know if that was at all the original routing, or?
I'm not sure what the original routing was. Since I've been here, we've flipped the nines back and forth. It's a couple different reasons.
Right.
But mostly pace play and just the journey itself was better.
And what they've done is very nice. You're saying, like, it's a good experience.
Exactly. You really get that full journey around the entirety of the different landscapes of the property, and you kind of start down the lowland and kind of finish right back there, which is nice.
Right. And whether it was the original routing exactly, holes still were in sequence, and there's a vibe that comes from that. There's a rhythm that comes from that.
I mean, it's your classic golden age golf course with very walking friendly, other than the big hill previously mentioned, but no long walks from greens to tee boxes, and very intent on the
walking
intent
golfer.
of the walking golfer. Yes.
Yeah, this is an exercise that we do. It's a sport.
To some, yes.
Excellent. So speaking of golf, you mentioned that you're going out today.
Yeah, I'm actually with Mike Weber, who you know well.
That's right.
We're gonna go play 9 holes this afternoon because it's not quite Golftober, but it's close enough to sneak out.
It's gonna be like 70 degrees out there. Yeah, it's gonna be beautiful.
Yeah, going to see Kyle Higgins over at Knickerbocker. So
yes,
haven't seen anything what he's done down there so far, but definitely excited to check that out.
Well, Kyle was a guest on the podcast back in the early part of this year, maybe I think probably May, June. So and he talked a lot about the work that they're doing at Knickerbocker. Very good episode for anyone that wants to listen.
I definitely did listen to that. So.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yes, absolutely. I'm excited to see what Kyle has done. He's done great everywhere he's been. So.
Oh yeah, he's an all-star superintendent. So okay, so let's kind of get a little bit more now about you, Matt. You where are you from, and how did you get into this crazy business of golf?
So I'm from the South Shore of Massachusetts, beach town, Marshfield. So I grew up, I think like most, where it's 16 years old. Mom says, you got a car now, get a job.
That's right.
And so I actually applied to 2 places. I applied to a golf course and I applied to a restaurant.
Perfect.
Ended up getting hired by both and decided my first job would be 2 jobs. So I worked on the golf course in the mornings and then the restaurant at night for a few days a week. So as a 16-and-a-half-year-old with 2 jobs, it was it was a lot of work, but it gave me some money in my pocket, which was nice.
Yes, and really, like, you have that personality and that characteristic right from the start. It sounds like that makes a great superintendent. You work a lot.
Yes, so we definitely work a lot, and that definitely hasn't changed, unfortunately, a little bit. But so in high school, first job, worked summers there, just small little family-owned walking only public golf course.
Okay.
And as bare bones as it gets. So
But was it well played? Was it popular?
it was very popular. I mean, it was
It's wonderful.
like $18 to walk it.
That's the best.
Nothing. And so started there as youngin, kind of worked for, so that was junior year of high school. So I worked up until, 3 years there, just kind of learning the ropes, taking some initiative. I had a couple other friends that worked on the crew with us, so we had a good time. Went off to school to study criminal justice, believe it or not, in University of Tampa.
Nice.
So that was a lot of fun. Came home, worked another summer on the golf course. About halfway through the summer, I said, this is what I want to do. I had friends that had gone into the program at UMass, and I said, I didn't realize this could have been a career, but as I'm doing it,
it's in your blood, dude.
It just is what it is.
It sinks in. It sinks in on you.
The interest in it, the day-to-day differences, and the ability. My main kind of focus on it was, it gives me the opportunity to say, this is what I did. Look how good I can do.
Yes.
And so I liken it. It's funny, in my first interview here at Paramount with Brian Chapin, that was part of my interview question, was it's almost like a sport where you can prove how good you are. And so I'm a competitive person by nature, and so that just kind of fit right in and stuck with me.
Yes, it is a competition, setting up a golf course and keeping it. It's a marathon as well.
Absolutely.
It's a grind. So yeah, you're right. That's very cool. So it fits. It fits with your personality.
Exactly.
So did you make a change with Tampa?
So rather than go back to Tampa that year, we kind of scrambled to UMass and kind of got accepted within like 4 weeks, and went into UMass Amherst to their 4-year program. And
perfect.
Kind of always history from there. Did a couple internships at up in the Boston area, one at Cohasset Golf Club, which is a very cool kind of unknown Donald Ross golf course, and then did 2 years with Paul Blanusa at Charles River Country Club.
Yes.
So the highlight of that internship was my second year. We actually co-hosted the U.S. Amateur with the Country Club.
Dude.
So we were the B site, and that really solidified. Okay, this is it. This is kind of see that next level of maintenance and appreciation and all of that goes with it.
Well, and as I understand, when it comes to hosting major events, the amateur is the longest and the hardest event.
Well, that was also part of why it was so nice to be the B site, because it was, we finished up on Wednesday. We had our kind of closing party. GM bought pizzas and beers for everyone, and texting our friends that are over at the country club being like, good luck for the rest of the week.
Wow.
Because we only had to do it for the prep, but then the actual event was only 4 days. They had it for, I think it was 9 or 10 days.
Yeah, I think it's usually 10 days.
Yeah.
Which is, and they also have advance weeks, So
yeah, exactly.
It's really like the better part of 3 weeks.
The best was, the story is the country club actually had their centennial the following Monday. So the crew didn't even get the break of finishing the tournament because they had to prep it for the centennial the following day. So they had that extra day tacked on.
Yeah, all those members were all amped up to play the tournament setup and everything.
Exactly.
Yeah,
but so that was all up on Donald Ross golf courses.
Classic golf.
Love it. Still very classic golf. Then came down here to obviously the AW Tillinghast course. A lot of same principles.
Can you describe any? What do you mean?
Just the way. A lot of the routing principles are very similar in the way that tees and greens complexes connect. The bunkering difference for Donald Ross to Tillinghast is a little bit different. Tilly kind of wrote about how you should really see the flash of a bunker. You should know that the obstruction is there, that the hazard is there. And Ross didn't quite have as much of that. He had a lot more grass down bunker faces. Still very deep in penal bunkers, but not the same flash. And then Ross had a lot of, that classic saying of you could hit a perfect fairway down the Donald Ross fairway, perfect drive down the Donald Ross fairway and creaming into the rough, just because he likes to put stuff in fairways that are kind of random. So there's a lot of texture to the fairways, a lot of kind of really cool features that are not necessarily true hazards, just kind of things to play around.
Now, how about Tillinghast in the fairways? Anything interesting there?
Tillinghast in the fairways, I haven't read a ton about his design. What's the word I'm looking for?
Like his design
Principles in the fairways.
Okay.
Is much wider, definitely wider fairways. Definitely all about angles. He's a big. Sorry, I'm kind of lacking the words here.
No, I'm putting you on the spot, dude.
Strategic architect. So bunkers are usually telling you where to hit the ball, not where not to hit the ball on a Tillinghast golf course. A lot of kind of wide fairways, but then needing the angles into the greens, because one thing about Tillinghast that we all know is his greens are nothing to be joked about, for sure.
Yeah, and do you still see that here? I mean, now you've done a redesign about 10 years ago. Do you still? I imagine you were trying to capture, and you weren't here for it, and we'll talk about that. But imagine there was trying to capture that old Tillinghast design.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like any kind of 90s golf course, what all the golf courses turned in the 90s, the greens turned into kind of just circles, kind of benign, whatever type of greens. Always very good condition and fast, but
right.
Didn't really have the character until Brian, my predecessor, came in and kind of expanded a bunch and found some of these cool green complexes that were always there, but just kind of hidden by years of rough encroachment and all of that.
Oh,
so,
yeah. I mean, it sounds like there wasn't that kind of attention to the history of the classic golf course until Brian got here in probably the 2000s, around 10, I don't know, around then.
Yeah, so Brian took over in, I think, 2009. And I think the transition started actually previous to him with Joe Gardner, who's actually well known in the industry as well.
Yeah.
Who's down at Fresh Meadow now.
Yeah,
so
that's right. Joe's on Long Island.
Not a bad history to follow up, which taking over your first golf course behind those two types of guys is not too bad, because it didn't have a lot to change, just kind of continuing to put out the product that our membership has come to expect and all of that.
Yeah. So excellent. So they in this redesign, they really did recapture those that shape of the old Tillinghast greens, which are really wild.
Absolutely. I think you could poll definitely any of our members and most guests, and they will not have the nicest things to say about our greens in a good way. They're very difficult. We actually try and control speeds to stay under the 12 number. I know that seems very fast to a lot of people, but we had back in the day it was up over 13, and so we've slowed the greens down a little bit.
Sure, you gotta play. Yeah, you gotta be able to play.
But they love it. They love anytime they're in their eyes slow. I'm hearing about it. Hey, why the green's slow today? Even though it may be more fun for them, everyone likes to pound their chest and say, "Oh yeah, my greens are fast."
Yeah, and
they are tough.
Oh, dude, that's great. That's great. Well, okay, so let's kind of get into some of the things. Now, you've been here since 2014. You mentioned.
Yeah, so I came in as second assistant right out of college in 2014,
and the real redesign and construction was pretty much wrapped up when you got here.
Yes, it was basically wrapped up. 2013. There was a little touch-up stuff in the spring of 2014 before I got there, but mostly finished by the time I got there.
Well, let's talk about like kind of some of you have mentioned. I'm thinking like, what was the impetus to redesign? And of course, you've mentioned recapturing the old architecture, but there was probably some other stuff that happened. So like, what were they looking to do, and what have you learned from what happened here? You can kind of describe.
So we used to be Delwood Country Club, which was a member-owned golf course. Things changed, and the Mandelbaum family came in to, excuse me for a second, I'm sorry. The Mandelbaum family came in and bought the took over the operations of the golf course.
Sure.
So in that, they kind of wanted to make a splash. So they brought in Jim Urbina, who had previously worked with Tom Doak, to do a complete restoration of the golf course. And really the impetus was, let's get people talking about us. Let's do stuff cool. Yeah. So they did some very cool things. They kind of went back to the old school vibe of everything. Took out almost all of the ball washers, trash cans, set up hole marker things, all of that.
Awesome.
Excess fluff accessories, and kind of went back to bare bones. We went to a different kind of old school looking flag and flag stick for a long time. And then actually, for one of the cooler things that they did that unfortunately we don't still have, was they did not put a collar on the greens when they rebuilt them.
Oh yeah, I love that look.
So they were probably one of the first to do that. Now I know, I think Philly Cricket has it. I think there's a handful out there now that are going without the collars, which for maintenance reasons obviously makes some sense. But even just the simplicity of the three heights of cut, you have the fairway, the rough, and the greens,
and the way that you can take down a 2-pass or an intermediate cut, that first cut of the rough in the surrounds, it functions as a collar used to function.
Yes,
it's fine.
Well, so that was part of it. Is we mow our rough at like 2 inches tops throughout the year. Sometimes even when it gets really tough, we'll get it down to 1 3/4. Because my philosophy is recovery shots are fun. Deep rough, tough to hit recovery shots. So
that's right.
You can get away with getting rid of some of the fluff if it's an overall generally playable golf course. You don't need as much of the quote unquote protection.
Right, and that's what makes for memorable rounds. That's like when you're hanging in the bar with your buddies at the golf. They're going to talk about, oh, do remember when you hit that eagle out of the rough?
Exactly, and so I'm a big golf first golf course superintendent. All of my philosophies are based around the game of golf first. That's what's most important to me personally.
Okay, so in the construction, you mentioned a lot of efficiency was a major, goal, and they were incredibly efficient in getting it done. The cost, they didn't spend too much money doing it.
Absolutely.
How did that happen? So
again, I wasn't here, so I don't want to speak too much onto what Brian did and did not do. From what was relayed to me from him, I mean, one of the great things about Brian was he was explaining to me why we did things and what we did, and was a very, very good mentor. It still is to this day. So
yeah, Brian's a great dude, Brian Chapin.
But so we did a lot. They did a lot of strip and flipping. So basically, they would say, "Hey, we're gonna expand this fairway and build a bunker over here. So why don't we strip this rough here, move that rough to build out this bunker face," and kind of a lot of that, taking turf from one place and moving it to the next. And they would kind of go hole by hole. They would rip up 2 holes and just kind of work their way along the golf course with being able to move sod from one place to the other. So there's not a bunch of fescue sod lines out there, bluegrass sod lines around bunkers and things like that. They added a lot of quote unquote natural areas, which is fescue grass.
Which you do a beautiful job with your fescue here, dude. I was out here while it was still up, and it was beautiful.
I appreciate that. Yeah, again, it goes back to my philosophy on golf first. Fescue, I believe, should not be a penalty area. It should be able to find your ball. You might get unlucky with a lie, but you should be able to find your ball and play out advance it and all of that.
Yeah.
But so they introduced a lot of the naturalized areas, took down a ton of trees, and just opened up all kinds of sight lines and everything like that. And yeah, I think the product of minimalism came from partly budget and partly let's make this place look old. It is old. It should look old, and kind of that was kind of the pushing factor. A lot of it was make things cool, not necessarily new, just make them cool.
Yeah, I love that. And as the resident tree hugger in this whole operation, I'd like to ring the environmental bell on the strip and flip, because like think about all the fossil fuel that you save doing that. Like you're not growing sod on a sod farm and you're not trucking it in.
Oh, absolutely.
It's very cool. So Yeah, yeah. Even taking down trees it does ring the environmental bell, because I guarantee that you log them,
Yep.
and that you're splitting firewood and that people are burning that, or they're burning it here, I'm sure.
And most of where the trees were taken out from have been turned into naturalized fescue areas, which is significantly reduced on all sorts of inputs,
Oh, yeah.
from mowing to fertilization to chemical to everything. So
Not to mention that fescue grows the incredibly deep roots, and then humifies that entire profile way down. So the soil becomes the carbon sink, and grows beautiful topsoil deep, deep, deep.
yep,
Right?
absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
All right. So that was, we had our tangent environmental bit. We can get back into the golf. So all right. So cool. So you really made you were efficient in saying, knowing what you wanted to do. We want to make this place, and this was Brian. This was the redesign. We want to make this place look old, and this is the way that we're going to do it, and happen to be like very efficient.
Absolutely. And they really, I mean, Brian and Jim went on a tour of America, it seemed like, to go look at all the different works that Tillinghast did. And they were very true to Tillinghast intent in everything they did. And so when you come look at this place, it truly does feel like an original Tillinghast golf course.
That's awesome. So minimalism, I think that's kind of continued to be a trademark as to the way you maintain Paramount here.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah.
I'd say so. I think that my philosophy, I'm still a new superintendent, so not all of my philosophies are really backed by that much yet.
Everyone evolves, dude.
But a lot of it comes from giving the plant what they need, what it needs, when it needs it, and really nothing more than that. So I'm low nitrogen, low inputs in general, and really just watching the turf and seeing what it's doing, and then kind of reacting. Reactance is always a word that kind of gets misconstrued in the turf industry. Everyone wants preventative, which when you're talking about disease control and all of that, I obviously very much agree, and we obviously spray preventatively. But when I'm talking about inputs nutrient-wise and mowing heights and things like that, a lot of what we do is reactionary, because if it's not, you don't know what you're doing, what's causing the effects of what your inputs are. So a lot of what I do is walking the golf course and being on all of the surfaces, and really the eye test of, does that look hungry? No? Okay, let's let it go. And our ball marks are healing over correctly, our divots coming in correct in a timely fashion, all of that. And if all of those things are happening, I don't really need to put all of this extra input in. And so I really kind of let the soil work for me and let that dictate when and how I'm fertilizing and adding all of these inputs.
Well, let's talk about the greens, construction-wise and turf type. What are they? How did that plant pan out?
So they are native push-up greens from about 1920.
So there was never. I'm happy to hear that. Like they weren't shelled out.
Never shelled. Although, like I said, having two previous very good superintendents before me, they have a very good profile.
No doubt.
So
no doubt. The top, which is the ideal soil profile, is the amended golf green, right?
I would agree.
Yeah.
I would agree. To be fair, I've never worked on a USGA green, but I think theoretically I enjoy what our soil types are and all of that.
Right, where it is sandy up top, but you have some meat down there.
Absolutely.
So anyway, okay. So and now turf type.
We are the fantastic mix of 60-40 power to bent, depending on which green you're standing on.
That's right,
So,
and the time of year.
In the time of year, yes. If I could snap my fingers and get rid of the bent grass, I would. Because, like I said, all of my focus is on maintaining the golf course is golf first, and I truly do believe that power is just such a great putting green surface,
especially for a 100-year-old at Tillinghast golf course.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, anyways, but you do now. The bent was kind of seeded in, interseeded.
Yeah, the bent's
time.
been getting seeded in for over time. I haven't seeded bent other than to repair areas in quite some time. But it's one of those things where something I learned early is grow what's going to grow. And
Absolutely.
whatever is thriving is what's going to thrive, and our job is to manage that into a good service.
Kind of knowing a little bit about your fertility program and your approach, you really do this meat and potatoes thing. You've got go food and grow food, and you balance that C to N ratio and keep it simple. Like you said, you have to be reactionary, or you don't know what is making the change. Like, so I think in conversation with you really pay attention and reflect and make a decision based on not overloading it. Like, so tell me a little bit about what you do on greens in terms of that C to N ratio.
So on greens, we use very, very light rates of N. And that's all coming from, for the first time actually this year, the Protein Plus package, which is obviously product from Earthworks.
Right.
And I've switched over from a different chemistry in the past to this Protein Plus, and I found that the growth and response is just extremely consistent from it at, quite honestly, very low rates. I think if I look here, my total N input on my greens this year is just under 3/4 pound of N.
Wow.
And now that's coupled with a few biostimulants. I use a lot of BioVantage to get some good, like you said, good carbon into the soil and all of that.
And actually inoculating a bacillus package and like
exactly.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that nitrogen is a tool to be used to get a specific response, and it's not something that we need to just push and push and push. The other thing that allows me to do is really be sorry, I'm losing the word there, but specific on my aerification processes as well. Because without overloading that nitrogen, you're really not building that OM profile up too high. And so I've gone back to just one true aerification a year, if needed. I've gone years where I don't do it. I've gone years where I do it. I have basically my number on my soil test that I'm looking for. If it's below X, I'm saying we're good. If it's above it, okay, maybe we'll do a little bit extra this year.
Now, the years that you skipped, do you do like a needle tine? Do you open it up a little bit?
So we definitely, every year we're needle tying.
Sure.
Needle tying, especially the problem greens, up to about once every 3 weeks throughout the summer.
Sure, so that's what you're opening it up.
Yeah, because like I said, I look at everything that I do, I look at why. I'm always looking at the why. So if I'm looking at an aerification process, but my organic matter in my thatch layer is where I want it to be, well, then the only why of aerification would then be for oxygen.
Right.
But I can do that minimally intrusive by just needle tying consistently. And so I can then take out one of my aerifications in the spring and have more spring golf, because like I keep saying, everything that I do goes back to what's best for the golfer, because that's who we're here for.
That's awesome. I heard you say earlier that you've got an aerification still coming up this year. Is that your coring for the year?
So my core, it's next Monday actually. Looks like the weather's going to dictate. So yeah, we used to do it in September, and
even at that,
like I said, if I could snap my fingers and get rid of the bent, so.
Yeah,
welcome on the POA coming in November, and let them play fall golf, because
it's the
who
best
doesn't
season.
love fall golf?
It's the best. Yeah, so wonderful. Okay, so that's really cool. And you also don't get any granulars out on the greens. You really have your finger on the pulse.
Yes, I don't put any granular. I haven't put any granulars out on the greens since I've even been an assistant here. We've been spoon feeding purely for at least 10 years now, probably longer than that on this property. And again, that all goes back to keeping that soil profile where you want it to be, and that kind of gives you a lot of freedom to make the right decisions and not have to, because there's reactionary and then there's chasing things. We don't want to be chasing things. We want to be reactionary to what we need to input without feeling like we're too far behind and now trying to catch back up.
Dude, that is so well said. You're right on. Now, teas were a different story. and tees, in conversation with you, were a limiting factor for you, and maybe that has something to do with the major increase in rounds in the last 3 years. I don't know. You can describe.
So tees have long been a struggle for us, in the sense that on a budget that we're working for, we obviously have our priorities, and tees, while do aesthetically need to look nice, you do end up putting the ball on a peg and hitting the ball. So it's not our first priority like the greens or even the fairways to that extent. But during the renovation, a lot of the tees, probably about 60% of the tees, got rebuilt and sodded with a low-mo bluegrass. So what ended up, the reaction from that was, if you know anything about low-mo bluegrass, you really need a lot of nitrogen to keep them where they want to be. And so we had the kind of effect of new sod bluegrass, a lot of initial nitrogen over the next few years, probably not enough core aerification because of the sod, and started to develop layers on those tees that were very difficult to penetrate, and started to really see struggles in the greens. The low-mo bluegrass itself was kind of a limiting factor because it doesn't spread the same way bent grass does. It doesn't quite recover the same way bent grass does.
It also needs a lot of heat to grow, and up here in the mountains, it doesn't. The springs are slow. So what we ended up doing was loved the look and the resiliency to traffic and all of that of the bluegrass, but for our situation, it just wasn't the right grass. So then over the years, we started to interseed bent grass into them, and now when you go out there, there's very little remnants of that bluegrass. It's mostly pure bent grass at this point. But the profile layering was a limiting factor.
But the profile was still an issue because of that original solid layer that ended up developing. And so I think this was 3 years ago. We really struggled with these specific sets of tees, and so I brought in a few different people to kind of go over options of how can we make this thing better.
And I think that's how we started. You and I
believe so.
Yeah,
I think that was a big starting point for us. And so I went from recommendations of you got to strip them. You got to strip them, get rid of that layer, and then resod it. And fortunately, we do have limiting factors here, and that wasn't really an option for us. We have a lot of play and not the biggest labor force, and so that wasn't going to work. So I was saying, okay, well, how can I manage it without necessarily going 100% into a rebuild? And that's where Earthworks came in, and I listened to a talk, actually at Topgolf back then.
That's right, it was great.
And you really talked about humidifying the soil and turning bad into good in terms of soil.
Yeah, those layers, particularly those thatch layers.
And making the microbes work for you and all of that. And that's where talked obviously a lot about the carbon. And so after hearing your talk there, I kind of dug back into it a little bit more and said, I think this is the route we're going to go. And so we then went to a more aggressive aerification process, with the amendments, the renovate and the micros in those holes to get kind of that carbon down into the soil and get those microbes working and turning into humus. And so I'd say over the past, since I started that process, I think 3 years ago, we still have long ways to go. I mean, nothing happens overnight or even within a year when you're talking about changing soil profiles and things like that.
That's right.
But we have seen a tremendous improvement in the holding capacity, because these were also built, that's part of what turned into the sod layers. They were basically built on straight sand on top of soil, and we all know that
they're like California greens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we know the issues there. So really started to increase our holding capacity, our CEC, and all of that, and
water holding capacity. Because that's another limiting factor I'm gonna bring up. But
absolutely, yes, that's to say the least.
Okay, so anyway, the tees, you went at it with the aggressive aerification programs. Exact opposite of what you're doing on greens, really.
Exactly.
Yes.
Because back to the reactionary, and we unfortunately got into a spot where we did have to chase. But that's kind of the thing is, there's different ways to skin the cat, and sometimes you need to be aggressive and sometimes you don't.
That's right.
Kind of making that decision.
That's right. That's cool. And it's cool that you don't pigeonhole yourself. Like you don't have to,
No.
you're just making the right decision for the right place. So anyways, you also get the BioVantage in there to kind of keep that consistent biology happening. Yeah. So that's cool, and that's something that's been working over time. I know you mentioned on fairways, you also keep that C to N ratio and simplicity. What do you use there?
So on fairways, I just use a 2900 with 50% slow release just to keep a little something out there. And then we're going to C3, and the C3 has been great for us for.
It's a money product.
I mean, it's just fantastic.
I love it.
Not even to mention the earthworms that seem to disappear. It's something that when Mike Weber actually spoke to me, he was like, try this product out, and it also has this kind of benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that benefit that was like, okay, I'll try this out, because
sure,
the amount of money we spend on quote unquote controlling earthworms is insane. And now this is a product that is really just making the soil better.
Right.
And I still don't know if we have an idea of why it's doing this with the earthworms.
Not exactly. I think it's a combination of stuff.
But anecdotally, it just works.
Yeah, you don't see the problem anymore.
You don't see the problem. And it's funny because Mike was out here a couple weeks ago, and he's like, oh, you still use the C3? And I go, actually, I'm just lapsed on my last spray, and there's earthworms everywhere.
Yeah. That's the other thing. It doesn't kill them, and it doesn't last forever. It's kind of there's a residual that wears out, but while it's out there, you're just not seeing the earthworms.
But again, getting that carbon into the soil and really making our soils work for us.
Oh yeah, dude.
Is huge.
You see reaction in the soil and reaction in the plant too. You get this great lateral and root growth in the plant that really helps manage the traffic and the drought that we can talk about.
Absolutely.
So now, drought wise, water wise, what's going on here? You mentioned 2 pump houses, one at the top, one at the bottom.
Yeah, so we have a long list of issues with our irrigation system. I know I'm not the only one in the industry with this. So we basically have about 500 gallons a minute on a good day to water the golf course.
Oof.
All of our fairway heads are behind valves, so mostly a double row type of system.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, so we have one smaller pump down on the lower end of the golf course that feeds directly in the main lines, and then we have our main pump station up top that feeds into smaller main lines. So we can put out about 500 gallons a minute. It's about ends up being like 5 minutes of water on our fairways at night. So not a lot of water going out. So fast and firm is not hard to come by when you come here.
Now tell me the extent of the drought here on this site this summer. How long did you go with how little water?
So we ended up with just over 2 inches of rainfall from June 15th to September 1st.
Okay.
So
yeah. So
that's unfortunately I can name those 4 rain events from memory. So June 15th was kind of the last end of the rainy season. Then we went to July 18th was our next rainstorm at about 1 inch.
Mm-hmm.
Then we went to about August, probably 15th. We got about 1/4 inch, and then we went all the way from August 15th to about September with about another 1/4 inch. So 4 rain events over 2 months is not ideal when you
2 months, more like 80 days.
Yes.
Like a long stretch.
Yes. So we definitely struggled. It was pretty easy to say it was the most difficult year that I've had growing grass, with some of the limitations and traffic, and we're still a busy golf course. And
so
the other
rounds, do you think?
So we do 18 to 20,000 rounds a year, depending on the year. The last couple of years we've been closer to 20, obviously with the pandemic and everything. And we just have a high usage club. These guys, they like to play golf. They're all fairly local, and
right.
Probably 85% cart rounds, 90% cart rounds. So all of that kind of adds into the bucket, and eventually the bucket overflows. So
That's right. So what did you learn this year about the resiliency of cool season grass out in the fairways, out in the rough, how it could handle 2 inches of rain in 80 days over only 4 events. And what did you learn?
So we've been dealing, obviously we haven't had a great irrigation system for a long time, so we've known that our turf is resilient. We've known that very low inputs when it comes to irrigation is going to be okay. A lot of the grass goes dormant. Basically what I learned the most is communication is key, because I'm sitting there looking at it as, guys, we haven't had rainfall in however long, and they're sitting there like, why is my golf course dead?
Right.
Well, the golf course is dead. There's a lot of dormant grass out there that looks like the Open Championship looked like this year, quite frankly. When that was going on, I was like, hey guys, this kind of looks like our place. Fortunately, they have it set up for that, and we are more of a parkland golf course. So members didn't love that answer. But I think that was the biggest thing, was just learning to communicate to the membership of what's going on, why it's going on, how we're handling it, and then what the future is going to look like. Because even though I will still stand by, the golf course played very well the entirety of the year. It's funny, the groups of guys that I play with say we have 4 different golf courses throughout the year. We have a wet spring, then we have a dry, fast, firm summer, and then we have just a fall that's just lightning fast, firm, all of that.
Oh, and since the rain on September 1st, it has just been a glorious fall.
Oh, absolutely. And probably 95% of the stuff that was quote unquote dead or dying has rebounded already, and
yeah,
all of that. And so
I was pleasantly surprised, just, around the neighborhoods, around everywhere, like how much that turf can really take going into dormancy and come back out.
It's really when you get to that point that we were at this summer, where grass is dormant and rain is nowhere in sight. Really what you're doing at that point, in my opinion, is you are just maintaining till that next relief. And so we're not trying to make the place anything other than it currently is. We're just trying to withstand the drought and the heat until we can get to that relief point, knowing that once we get that rain, that nice nutrient releasing rain, we're gonna bounce back, and really minimizing the truly dead grass from the just looks ugly for a little while.
That's right. And the 500 gallons a minute was enough to do that. And the way you have your plant trained and the way you have your program set, it was enough to do that.
Yes, absolutely. And greens you can manage. It's the fairways definitely took a beating with that much car traffic and that much heat and drought stress, but
even those areas are back.
Even those areas are now almost fully recovered.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Did you throw seed out there?
We threw seed out there late August, right as we knew that next rainstorm was coming. We went and seeded a bunch of spots and things like that.
Was that bent grass, ryegrass?
That was bent grass. I don't put ryegrass in my fairways anymore.
Okay.
You end up, in my opinion, my experience, if you start when I start seeding ryegrass, it's just a never-ending cycle of seeding ryegrass.
That's
because
true.
It doesn't last.
Are you seeding fine fescue into the fairways?
So I've gone back and forth between seeding fine fescue with a bent grass. I haven't seen my driving range. I really like it because it's more of a visual for them. You can start to see that that kind of green growth coming up in the divots and everything a little bit quicker than just the bent grass.
It almost encourages people to replace, to seed their divots.
Exactly. But in the fairways, just because of a cost, we've gotten rid of the fine fescue and we're just seeding straight bent grass.
Because when you ultimately never saw that fine fescue like mature and last. Like, do you feel like you see any fines in your fairway stands out there?
Not anything from recent. Nothing that I felt that we seeded the fine fescue, because we would interseed fine fescue and bent grass at the same time, and so you the first grass you would see would be that fine fescue, but then by the time you actually go and look at that stand, it's bent grass.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. I'm just kind of trying to learn. Like,
Yeah.
Because I love fine fescue fairways. I was listening to an Earthworks podcast, Bobby Searle, up in Maine, and I'm blanking on the not Appowamis, but it's an Indian name like that.
Trying to think of what that would be up in.
But he has fine fescue
Yeah, okay.
fairways. He's on the coast. Fine fescue fairways. I remember his tweet from this summer, like where it was so dormant. I mean, so
Interesting.
dormant. And he did, and he was, the tweet was him pulling a cup to bring into the office to see what's going to happen here. And then he did a side by side, probably about 60 days later, of that same dormant pick, and the fairway completely bounced back. It was awesome.
It's so cool to see that stuff. Fine fescue up there. I'm assuming he probably doesn't have the same amount of cart traffic.
Yeah,
because that's obviously
sounds like it's walking. It's a links golf course.
Yeah,
I mean. So
so that's part of the limiting factor with the fine fescue. It obviously has that enormous drought resistance, but it is a little bit more traffic susceptible. So with the amount of rounds that we do and everything like that, it's
it doesn't. And like you said, you're Parkland. You're on the mountain. It's not that.
exactly.
I worked at St. Andrews too. So
okay.
Like we were seeding fine fescue all the time.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I just find it interesting that I just think it's so cool that it really can look great at that like fine fairway cut.
Oh, absolutely.
Or greens cut. They're seeding fine fescue into greens, so they're wild.
The differences in grass types and region to region. I mean, you're talking about Maine, which it's 7 hours away. But you're talking about a completely different approach, a different disease pressure, different insect pressure, just all the different climates that we have and the different ways that different people utilize similar, different, or wild, for lack of a better word, tactics to do what they need to do on their property. It's very cool.
Man. Yeah. So, dude, this was an awesome greenkeeping talk. I really appreciate it. I think that we covered a lot, and you really shared a whole lot about Paramount and about what you do here.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. This was cool. It's always nice to talk to someone. Without an assistant these days, you don't have those conversations as much. So it's always nice, kind of racking the brain and explaining what's going on.
That's right. And everyone's going to find this very interesting. This was a great talk. So thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jack. I appreciate it.
You got it.